You're watching Split Decision, and tonight we've got a special episode of its UFC 248 preview. We've got two title fights on this card. Two big title fights, one which is the women's strawweight title, and the other is the middleweight title. So it's definitely going to be an action-packed card. Let's get into it, Pat. Well, what we got first for the women's strawweight?
So first we have the champion Zhang Weili facing former champion and the greatest women's strawweight fighter of all time in Joanna Jedrzejczyk. So it's Zhang Weili's first title defense after winning the title from Jessica Andrade in her home country. And it's a tough matchup for both women. They both present really unique problems that the other has not faced before. And I really don't know what's going to happen. As I said before, Joanna Jedrzejczyk is, the most successful women's strawweight of all time. She's won the title, had 5 successful title defenses, got her immediate rematch upon losing it to Rose Namajunas, and then went up and challenged for the flyweight title, losing to Valentina Shevchenko. But Zhang Weili is on a tear, to say the least. And the way that she's been beating women is pretty devastating. She's got a ton of power and really precise striking. She comes from an interesting background in that she's Chinese, so a lot of her background is traditional Chinese martial arts like Kung Fu, and she does Tai Chi and things. So everything she does is just a little different than a lot of MMA fighters are used to seeing. It's the angle's slightly different, or the setup for the punch is slightly different, or the setup for the takedown is slightly different because she studies Chinese wrestling and grappling as opposed to focusing mainly on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and kind of freestyle or Greco-Roman wrestling. So she offers a little bit different of a look than a lot of people have seen. That being said, Joanna Jedrzejczyk has an extensive kickboxing career, so she's seen just about every striking style you can see. And on top of that, she's had an extensive MMA career. And she, up until the loss to Rose Namajunas, was considered one of the best strikers in MMA. And I think she still is, to be fair. She's one of the best kind of traditional Dutch kickboxing style, Muay Thai style fighters. And she offers something that Zhang Weili hasn't seen yet in how varied her striking game is. She's just constant pressure, constant forward movement. She's always throwing something. If you're just outside, just at the edge of the range, she's throwing leg kicks. If you're a little closer, she's throwing teeps to the body or push kicks to the body, front kicks to the face, roundhouse kicks to the body, roundhouse kicks to the head. And then as soon as you're anywhere near her, she's going for those big combinations that she throws. She has a lot of punches and bunches, a lot of punches really quickly. And she has a great clinch game as well. She is able to land a lot of elbows in the clinch. She lands knees. She likes to pressure people against the fence and back them up so they have nowhere to go, and then just unload with just a barrage of everything. She'll back people up against the fence and punch them until they start to move, and then kick them to get them back where she wants them, and then start punching them again. It's pretty impressive.
So, for Jedrzejczyk, who is the challenger here, what does she really need to be looking out for outside of, like you mentioned, that a little bit difference in a fighting style coming from her opponent?
I think that she needs to really prepare for something that she's had a little bit of trouble with in the past in fighters like Valentina Shevchenko, and that is the size and power of Zhang Weili. Zhang Weili has serious stopping power in her punches, which you don't commonly see in women's MMA in general, outside of your Cyborgs or your Amanda Nunes. But you definitely don't see that very much in the 115-pound strawweight division. So I think that power could pose some serious problems for Joanna. If she eats a big punch, it could completely change the dynamic of the fight.
So moving on, we have the middleweight title, where we have the champion Israel Adesanya going up against Yoel Romero. And Interesting that Romero got this fight, given that he has been on a bit of a losing streak lately. Well, I mean, what's that all about?
So, yes, Romero has only won one of his last 4 fights. He's lost his last 2 fights, which were a super close split decision to Robert Whittaker and a super close split decision to Paulo Costa. So, he's kind of like the boogeyman of the division. Nobody wants to face him. He is a freak of nature. I mean, you look at him, and he's built like an action figure. He's amazing, like, physical specimen. He's 42 years old, and the dude can still stand and do just backflips off of flat ground and all sorts of crazy shit. And his power is just phenomenal. At any point in any fight, one strike can completely shut down the other fighter. And that's why, not only that, but his Olympic level wrestling, he's an runner up in the Olympic team, I think. And so he's amazing wrestler, powerful takedowns, and just devastating striking power. And so he's just bad news for anybody who has to stand across from him. There's not much you can do to negate those factors.
But I'm not sure I understand the concept of how a 42-year-old fighter coming off of 2 losses gets a title shot.
So a lot of people thought he won the second fight against Whittaker, so he should have been the champ. And then a lot of people thought he won the fight against Paulo Costa as well. So it's kind of like, consensus is he's one of the top 2 middleweights among media and fans.
So consensus is he's gotten robbed from with some of these losses.
I mean, when you say robbed, you think like Manny Pacquiao versus Timothy Bradley, where it was like so egregious of a decision for Timothy Bradley that it's absurd. I think in both of those fights it was close enough that, what are you going to do? The other reason he got this fight is that the champ, Israel Adesanya, called him out, which is something that no one does. No one asks to fight Yoel Romero. He's a terrifying person. It's absurd. And so for the champ to say, I want to fight him, and for him to be involved in 2, I mean, even 3, if you really want to look back at his first fight against Whittaker, it was pretty close too. I think Whittaker won that one more convincingly than the second one, but his last 3 losses have been close enough that if they would have given them to him, nobody would have argued, So between that, the fact that he's terrifying and everybody knows he's one of the best in the world, and the fact that the champ decided to call him out and ask for this fight, they're putting him in the match. That being said, the other guy who would have gotten the title shot, Paulo Costa, injured. Robert Whittaker just lost to Israel Adesanya. So that title picture is kind of muddy at the moment. The top of the division is kind of crowded with guys who could get title shots based on their record or could not, or somebody who's injured. So given the circumstances, Yoel Romero is just as good an option as anybody else. So since the champ asked for it, they gave it to him. And I respect him for it. Because, like I said, nobody calls out Yoel Romero. It's a terrifying prospect and probably the worst matchup in the division for the champ. A long precision striker versus a dude with just nukes in his fists and power wrestling against a guy who's got a crazy kickboxing pedigree and, presumably doesn't have the best ground game in the division. Power wrestling, big shots versus great takedown defense and precision striking. It's a real interesting matchup. So it's a fun fight.
Well, now that you explain it like that, it does make a bit more sense to me.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. I think, so Israel Adesanya has an amazing kickboxing pedigree. I think he only has 1 loss in kickboxing. Comes into the UFC, demolishes just about everybody he faces. I think he maybe has 1 decision, and that was against Kelvin Gastelum, who, again, top of that weight class and is looking for a fight to get him back into title contention. But I think it was a bad strategy by Adesanya that led to a decision as opposed to Adesanya being smarter. You know, I think he Gastelum poses an interesting matchup for Adesanya in that he's a smaller guy. His striking is closer in range just due to the fact that his limbs are shorter, but he moves in and out so well and uses feints well enough to draw people in. That being said, I think if they fought again, Izzy is enough of an elite striker that he would have a completely different game plan and be able to outstrike and probably put Gastelum away and not fall for some of the traps he fell for in that first fight, where he kind of got lured into, you know, kind of a firefight, trading shots with Gastelum. But I think that Adesanya in this fight will maybe be able to keep Romero at range. He has great long strikes, long limbs, knows how to set traps, knows how to use his footwork to cut corners, knows how to draw people in. So if he can get Romero to kind of bait, you know, bite on those feints and try to jump in with the big power shot, he can start to pick Romero apart by just getting slightly out of the way and landing his own shots. We'll see if it works. But Adesanya also has power in his shots. You know, it's not that he has crazy power, right? He's kind of like an Anderson Silva style guy where his timing and precision is what gets him the finish. You know, there's a lot of guys who have like Romero. He has that one punch knockout power. He can land a weird little shot on somebody and knock him out cold. Then you have guys like Anderson Silva or Conor McGregor, who their power is, you know, what people perceive as their power is really predicated on landing that perfect shot at that perfect moment in the fight, baiting people into doing what they want them to do so that they can counter at the right time. And that's what Adesanya does, and he does it incredibly well. He did it to Robert Whittaker, who's one of the better strikers in the division, and has a really, really interesting style as far as the middleweight division is concerned, where he has kind of a karate background, so he leaps in and out, and he has a real wide stance. His upper body isn't quite where everybody else's is, where a lot of kickboxers and boxers lean forward. Whittaker stands more upright, and so he's a little further out from other people. But Adesanya was able to bait him into leaping in, and then Adesanya just leaned back to land that long hook. They actually were trading left hooks, and Adesanya just knew when it was going to happen and threw first and caught him at the end of the punch. But in order to do that, he had to be backing up as Whittaker was coming in, and he baited him into that. They had several exchanges where Whittaker had thrown that punch, and so Izzy knew that was going to happen. And so as Whittaker was coming in, he took a step back, leaned his whole body back, and pivoted and caught him with that left hook and put Whittaker out cold. So if he's able to bait Romero into something similar, he could do the same thing to Romero.
What's the age gap between these two fighters? I mean, you said Romero's 42. I mean, I'm guessing Adesanya would be significantly younger.
Yeah, I think he's late 20s, early 30s maybe. He came into MMA a little bit later than a lot of people do because he was so entrenched in kickboxing. And he had an incredibly successful kickboxing career and actually turned down invitations from the UFC earlier in his career because he didn't think he was where he needed to be with his grappling and takedown defense, which is unheard of. When the UFC comes calling, everybody just says, yep, and goes in and then gets thrown to the wolves and dies for the most part, you know. Adesanya turned him down, waited, and then came into the UFC, and in less than 2 years was holding an interim title and then earned the undisputed title and, you know, became the middleweight champ, the true middleweight champ, by beating Robert Whittaker.
That's really interesting that he would know that he need improvement in that part of his game before he could really go up to the UFC.
Yeah, it shows a real maturity and what I think is his biggest weapon, which is his fight IQ. He's one of the smartest players in the game. I think that, like I said, most of his fighting style is not based on being like physically bigger or even faster or stronger or anything. Most of his style and his success is based on figuring out the other guy luring them into something and setting a trap that they fall into and taking advantage of it perfectly. And that is what we see out of the highest level strikers in the game. That's what we saw out of Anderson Silva, and, you know, there's not many other people that compare to Anderson Silva and Israel Adesanya as far as their striking prowess goes in MMA, but it's the first one that comes to mind. And I think that Adesanya has all the tools to win this fight. It's just, to me, it's a question of how conditioned is Romero, because he tends to gas out. He's such a big, strong dude that carrying that body around is not an easy thing, and keeping it going that quickly and that explosively for 5 rounds is not easy at all. So, how conditioned is Romero, and does Romero try to use that really good grappling background? Romero has tended in recent times to try to showcase his striking and his power, which is a bad idea against a striker the caliber of Adesanya. That being said, if he comes in and tries to wrestle, and Adesanya then is able to defend the takedown and, you know, keep Romero off of him, Romero then has no choice but to strike. So Romero has to hit that balance between wanting to showcase his power and being smart about when to do it and when to try to take Adesanya down. If he's able to set grappling traps, you know, if he's able to lure Adesanya into a sense of security that he's going to try to strike with him and then get a big takedown, he's a hell of a guy to have on top of you. He's huge, his power is crazy, and his top control is nuts. So if Adesanya can't stay up, it's a bad night for him. But conversely, if he can't set those traps striking and Romero is able to land a big shot, it's also a bad night. So I think, you know, as we commonly see, it's...
So are you saying that Adesanya doesn't have much of a ground game? Or is he just susceptible to, like, if he gets put in a bad position, he's not going to be able to get out of it?
It's not that he doesn't have much of a ground game. We haven't seen all that much of it because he hasn't needed it. His takedown defense is you know, some of the best in the game. But it's more of a question of he's facing a guy that qualified for the Olympics in grappling. You know? Like, they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. Adesanya has the highest level of striking you can have as far as his pedigree and accomplishments are concerned. And Romero has just under the highest achievement you can possibly have in grappling, which is an Olympic medal. So, you know, conventional wisdom would say, obviously, if it stays striking, the striker's going to win, and if it goes grappling, the wrestler's going to win. Depends on who can enact their game plan, really.
I mean, I'd be interested to see what the odds are in terms of betting on this fight, because I would have to think Romero is a significant underdog, just given out the fact of his age and that he's coming off of losses.
Yeah, I think he is. He's coming off of losses, his age. You know, Adesanya hasn't been taken down all that much in his career, and Romero hasn't shown much of an interest in using that high-level wrestling lately. So, you know, MMA is a very fickle, what have you done for me lately sort of sport. You know, nobody cares what you did 3 years ago. They only care how you looked in your last fight. Romero looked good, didn't use a lot of takedowns, just wanted to strike. So since he's shown lately to stay more in the realm that Adesanya is an expert in, I'd say he's probably the underdog by a decent bit, rightfully so, and I'd say that Adesanya probably takes it. I think that Romero will probably try to strike, get tired, and Adesanya will lure him into something and finish him probably in third or fourth.
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with you on that one. But who knows? Maybe we'll look like dumbasses.
Maybe. I've looked like a dumbass on this show more often than not. So,
well, we'll just have to see what happens. But this is an exciting card. 2 title fights. Should be great. And stay tuned, everybody. Make sure to like and subscribe. We'll be around.
You need a good outtake? Is that what you need?
Oh, yeah. Hit me.
Trying to think of a shitty joke.